Ed Zoll published an article that basically said Dr. Moore is being prosecuted by Pam Bondi. That article got picked up by Marjorie Taylor Greene, and she said, I'm going to write a letter and I'm going to contact DOJ. RFK, again, this time through his HHS account, said this is persecution, this cannot happen. Senator Mike Lee posted, that again, that something needs to be done. This can't be, this can't be allowed. It was a phone call that he was trying to set up an interview with Tucker Carlson. Okay. I said, are you calling from the White House? Are you the same guy? They got a call from DOJ and DC, and they're dismissing your case.
Welcome to God and Country. I'm Uriah Kennedy, and this is Ingrid Bettridge, and we have a great guest on with us this week. This is Dr. Kirk Moore. Dr. Kirk Moore is a plastic surgeon, amongst a lot of other stuff you do medically, and he is both famous as well as infamous,
right?
Because you were prosecuted during the Biden administration for handing out COVID vaccines without actually handing out COVID vaccines. And they didn't like it, and you were obviously doing what your patients wanted you to do. But
I prefer to say he was accused of serving his patients and giving them what they asked for.
Exactly.
Giving them a
That's
choice.
what we all want to say.
Joe Altman told me that I was accused and I was being indicted and prosecuted for not murdering and maiming my patients. That's what he said. That was
not murdering. That's a good way to terminology.
That was what he said. You need to put that up. And so I did. I put that up as my pinned X post for 2.5 years was on there. I'm being indicted for not murdering and not maiming my patients.
I love how you phrase that. But we're going to get deep into the whole COVID topic, the whole vaccine topic. We got a lot of information to go over here. He actually just came off of the Tucker Carlson podcast.
Right. September 1st.
So we're not too far behind him.
Right.
Not too far behind him, but it's going to be a fun podcast today. So just remember to like, subscribe, and share our podcast. As we've stated in multiple podcasts, we're getting quite a bit of suppression. The YouTube is really controlling the number of impressions we get, which isn't very many. That's how they kind of suppress you. It was a funny thing is we just did a podcast on Charlie Kirk.
The Memoriam podcast.
The Memorial Contact.
Which apparently was not appropriate for children under the age of 18.
Yeah.
What did we say?
They even gave me a timestamp as to when it was inappropriate, and I was talking about something about a video on some other show or something like that, and I was like, this has nothing to do with even Kirk at the time. So it was...
I'm interested why the pornography videos are appropriate for... I guess I'm not in the know.
No.
I don't know why...
No, you're not allowed to make
pornography is appropriate for children.
Under the age of 18.
A memorial.
Well, pornography is okay in public schools. That's why.
Right.
Yeah. And there's one point on that podcast where we put a clip of the shooting of Charlie Kirk, but it's all blurred out. The whole thing's blurred out. And there's like a dozen other videos on YouTube where it's also... The whole thing's blurred out. And... they didn't even mention that, but something else was inappropriate for under age of 18, and I couldn't get around it. We yelled at their customer service, and they wouldn't do anything. So we ended up reposting it, and they haven't reflagged the new one yet because their AI, I guess, is not reflagging it. So we'll see how this goes. But we're going to get into this podcast. Again, up and coming. Next week, we'll have Megan Strader on again, our number one podcast. Just got off the phone with ICE as we're answering questions for them, but they're going to be here the first week of October, followed right in unison with Border Patrol, right back to back there. Mike Lee's office just got back to us again saying they're still going to be on as long as both the House and Senate can pass the budget and they can go into recess, and we'll see how that goes since... as of today, I think
recess.
Well, they're coming back from recess right now.
Right.
And then they're supposed to vote on the budget and then go back into recess before the 17th.
Before the 17th of October.
October.
Oh, so they have to work really hard between now and then.
Yeah, but they're only supposed to be in for 2 weeks, but we'll see how long it takes because they have to pass the budget. And it's, from what I hear, it's passed the House already, the continuing resolution. And then Schumer and Booker wanted to meet with President Trump as of this morning, and he turned them down flat because they wanted to add a whole bunch of garbage to it. And he says, no, not until you guys are serious. So we'll see if that postpones it at all. But right after Mike Lee, then we got Angel Studios coming in with one of their new shows that they're coming out called Trust and Treason. So show on the Holocaust and World War II. So
It's quite a lineup.
it's quite a lineup, and you're a big part of it because I've been fascinated by COVID and the vaccine because I have a lot of connections over there. I knew what was going on when like we were talking before. In my normal day-to-day job, I'm in the medical industry, do a lot of X-rays and lasers and stuff like that. And the place where I have my laser that I designed myself made is in Wuhan, China. It's literally like 2 blocks down from the Wuhan lab, the infamous Wuhan lab. And
So when did they have that fire at the Wuhan lab? Did you know about that? Have a fire,
I didn't ask them about that.
Like in 2019 or something, they had a fire and they supposedly lost a lot of data or something like that. That was one of the
big cover-ups.
That was one of the big cover-ups of this.
Yeah.
And again, I don't know if it ever happened. We were just told that it happened. We didn't see any pictures or video of anything. It was just
I don't think it did
So-
because they didn't mention anything about a fire going on, and they probably would have mentioned it. Again, my
they didn't see the virus kind of leak out and walk across the street.
No.
Go down to the open air kind of.
Well,
food market.
they openly admitted, it says, yes, there's a lot of strange testing that goes on over there. And he says, we don't necessarily trust it because there's always high government officials coming in and out of the building. And they said, most of us try to stay away from it because we don't want to have contact with anybody that's coming in and out of that building. They're always saying, we're just trying to stay quiet and unnoticed, which is what I would do if I was in a communist country.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say. That's the communist way, right?
That's the communist way. And they're really trying not to get noticed. In fact, they expressed honest fear of answering anything, even over a WhatsApp chat or a WeChat conversation. They says everything's recorded.
Yeah.
We could get caught doing this.
Yeah,
we
we don't blame him
discussed
because
anything
you had the
new.
one citizen was on TikTok or such, and he had either worked for a lab or had information, and he was on there, and he disappeared. And
Yeah.
the TikTok community said they had him killed, and he's never surfaced again.
Yeah. Look, I was listening to John Solomon on the way up today, and he was saying that the number one the number one tool that we have against a tyrannical communist socialist government is freedom of speech.
Yeah.
And that's why we're seeing now, I mean, we certainly see the left, in the 60s, the left was, hey, freedom of speech, freedom of speech, freedom of speech, the whole MLK civil rights movement, freedom of speech, don't take anything away. Let's look out for the little guys and the workers. And now they're kind of like, everything is hate speech, everything is this. And we're actually starting to see that infiltrate into the GOP. We had the attorney general just last week, talk about there's freedom of speech and then there's hate speech.
Yeah, I think
And she backed off of it,
She backed off of it real
immediately.
quick.
I mean, real quick, within a couple of hours. Look, I'm a free speech absolutist. Okay. I mean, you should be entitled to say anything that you want. You got to deal with the consequences of whatever it is that you say. Okay. But you should say anything you want. If you want to go into a theater with 200 people in there and yell fire and have somebody get trampled and everything else, then you're responsible for that.
Yeah.
And you have to be held accountable for it. But we should in no way, shape, or form ever limit anybody's ability to speak or to say anything that they want to say.
Well, everybody right now is comparing Jimmy Kimmel to Tucker, right? Tucker got fired, and Jimmy Kimmel was like all over that, making fun of the guy, and now he gets canned and saying, "You guys are limiting my free speech."
You even have people that are, I think even some people inside of TPUSA and some people that are way over there with, with the whole Charlie Kirk movement and everything else, saying that he shouldn't be allowed to, go to AmFest and he shouldn't be allowed to speak and he shouldn't be a guest and everything else. I mean, again, what did Charlie Kirk die for if it isn't for the ability to speak freely? He died underneath the tent that said, "Prove me wrong." Okay, that's encouraging people to talk to him and to tell him, not shoot him.
Yeah, that's the whole premise of debate and having that back and forth is let's put the ideas together. I'm not saying we're 100% right 100% of the time. That's why we talk about it. Well, let's see the different points of view, but there's going to come down to a point where one of us is going to get proven right, and that's the direction we go.
Unless you get killed.
Unless you get killed. Unless you hate the other side so much that it's no longer about free speech, but it's about attacking the person themselves.
Right.
It's not attacking the idea.
That's the
anymore.
ultimate.
It's about attacking the person.
I mean, that's the ad hominem attacks, right? I mean, that's what they do. They don't, and that's the struggle that we have right now is that nobody has any pushback against these ad hominem attacks when you're attacking the person and you're attacking the message, you're attacking the messengers, not the message.
Yeah.
And you don't go after the facts or whatever it is that they're telling you. You're attacking that person over, what it is that he or she.
Well, they don't have enough facts to have an argument against the argument.
Right.
Therefore,
but the fact that we have allowed it has allowed us to get to the point where I'm not saying it's okay to assassinate Charlie Kirk, but they think that it is. And that's where all of the people that were coming out that were celebrating it, it's because that kind of view and mentality and outlook on somebody is allowed. I mean, there's so many people that used to be friends of mine that when they found out that I'm a free speech absolutist, that I'm a Second Amendment absolutist, that I'm, that I am who I am and everything that I do in terms of what it is that I did with COVID, which we'll get into, they don't talk to me anymore. Best man at my wedding from 1998 doesn't talk to me anymore.
Yeah, I see a lot of that where they get so indoctrinated on the other side, but it's where they want to be indoctrinated on the other side because their point of view matches it. They want to eliminate any other point of view. Yeah,
that's the struggle, right? I mean, we grew up in a country where, look, I grew up and I'm older than, I don't know if I'm 60 years old. So, I mean, I'm an old guy.
1 year.
Okay. So, but I grew up in a day and age when, my parents would say sticks and stones will break your bones, but, names will never hurt you. That's the way we should be, right?
Yeah. There's that comedian that says that. So what if you're offended?
Right.
Be offended.
That's right. Be offended. I don't care. I don't care. Doesn't matter to me. You're the one that's offended.
Exactly. But it's funny because it's easy for the left to fall into that because that's the way their personality is. That's the way their moral structure is. They want to believe that. And so it doesn't take much for some leftist politician just to throw something out there and see what sticks type of mentality and just have a whole bunch of people follow it because they want to follow it. That's where they want to go. And then
they want to go to that division.
They want to go to that division, but they also want to go to that point of view because they don't like anything else that has to do with conservatism. What we've stated in many podcasts is the biggest issue with the left is they do not want responsibility for their actions. And the right is you have to be responsible for what you do. And the way we gear our responsibility is directly between us and God. Our God-fearing belief says we're responsible for our actions. And the left says, no, I don't want to be responsible, and anything that's going to force me to be responsible, I want to reject that. And so they reject anything that has to do with it, the entire party, Christianity, everything. So it's very easy for them to fall into something where we want socialism, we want big government, we want free sex, and that's why we want abortion. We don't want to have any of these. We don't want to be responsible for our actions. Right. And if you're going to make me be responsible, then
you're suppressing me.
You're suppressing me. You're
you're
I
see
racist.
A lot of hope because in this tragedy alone, there's the couple who had gone to an event of TPUSA previously to go and argue. They could not wait. They were from the left. They couldn't wait to go argue him. And when they got there and saw how open he was to listening to them and just having a debate about the issue, they actually went and attended the funeral. They said, we didn't agree with everything he stood for or where he was, but this man isn't who they were painting him to be. And we now have a respect for the conservative community.
Well, and look, that's all that Charlie was trying to do,
right.
In my opinion. He was never rude to anybody. He never cut anybody off. He never let anybody not speak. I I mean, he would get to the end of an argument. He'd say, okay, look, you've had enough time. You know, let's get to the next person. But he was never rude, never demeaning. He never kind of belittled anybody in front of a camera or anybody in front of a microphone. He was just, you know, even though he didn't agree with him, he was open to listening to him and just debating them on the actual facts or lack of facts or whatever. And that's the tragedy out of all of this, right?
Well, we've been stating for a while now that in our own comments section on this podcast, our podcast comment section has gone nuts with anti-Charlie stuff. Just thousands,
is that right?
Thousands of them. It's crazy how demeaning it is. And I thought like big podcasters were going to get that. No, ours is just it's inundated with it. And the biggest thing they all come
it's on the faith side.
Yeah.
You know, it's
the biggest thing they all come down with is that he's racist, that he doesn't like black people.
But if
it all
you
comes
ask them
down
to write proof, they cannot.
Well, they all quote the DEI conversation every single time. And
But
they
DEI
always misquote the DEI comments, and they always short it. I'm like, so where's the rest of the conversation?
Exactly.
Because they always give me these little clips in there, and I'm like, so where's the rest?
Well, that's what it comes down to. The and I, not somebody that maybe you need to bring up or anything else. But and I won't bring his name up, but they talk about the like the 6-second TikTok videos, right, where they have just 15 words, and then that's the only thing you hear or see, and it's completely taken out of context.
Well, most of the commenters, that's all they ever see, because they will not go and watch the full video. They don't care to. Right. They don't want to be proven wrong.
Well, they're just scrolling. Okay. Yeah. So they see that second, that 6-second clip, the 10-second clip, the 4-second clip. That's all they get out of it, and that's all they want to get out of it.
That's all that's the point, is that's right. All they want to get out of it. They don't want to get anything more out of it because they know that's probably wrong, but they're so that swayed on that side that I don't want to be proven wrong because that's where I want it to be.
Right.
This has to be wrong, because if it's right, then a lot of the other stuff you guys are saying is also right, which would force me to be responsible for other actions I've done. And it just has a little big old domino effect for them. And so they got to hold it all up as this big old
I still have faith
facade.
A lot more people are going to be coming to see the light. I've read the end of the book, and so I know in the end a lot of people come around.
Well, that 6-second quote is, he's constantly quoted as saying, well, if I get on a plane with a black pilot, I'm going to be questioning if he's qualified. Cut clip, right? Cut clip. So that clip is like everywhere, and nobody talks about it. And so when I get on there, I'm like, so you're talking about the DEI conversation, right? So where's the rest of the conversation? And that's my response to all. Where's the rest of it?
Right.
Where he actually says, we want to hire people based off of their qualifications, their expertise, and not off the color of skin. That is racism.
Right.
When you're hiring somebody based off the color of skin and not off of.
Well, and that's what DEI is.
Yeah.
DEI itself is racist.
It is.
Because you're excluding people. I mean, we should be in a, and Donald Trump talks about this all the time, and he doesn't use the word meritocracy, but he uses, we want to bring people in here that deserve to be here.
The best and brightest.
Right. The best and brightest, and we want those people here. And that's what a meritocracy is. And that's what all other countries in the world do as far as letting people in, right? I mean, their immigrants are people that deserve to be there and merit to be there. And we've gone off the rails in the last 50, 60 years.
Yeah. And Charlie fought that same thing over and over again, because everybody boiled it down to this whole DEI conversation. And one of his best rhetorical responses was about the NFL. And he says, so if we went and applied the same math to NFL and required it to be even blacks versus whites in the NFL, would the caliber of play go down or go up? He was asking a black guy, and he says, well, it'd probably go down if it was mostly whites. I'm like, he says, I would agree with that. So,
but can we use that clip then and say that he's racist?
Yeah, exactly. It says, but how would you do that with a pilot or a brain surgeon? It applies all directions, right? And then the light bulb started going on in the guy's head, and he's like, oh, I get what you're saying. And it kind of shut him up, and he went on to the next guy. But they don't put that in there anywhere. It's just kind of funny. So let's get on to you. COVID is a fun conversation. all surprised us back in 2020 when the beginnings of it, back in 2019, people just started talking about it for those last couple months, right? October, November, December, we started hearing rumblings of it. Come January, February, all of a sudden, everything started shutting down. So walk us through how you got into your industry, medical industry. I know you shared before that you're in the military before, did a number of years treating military people. Then you had your residency and you did family practice, kind of like a normal doctor during that, and gained a considerable amount of experience before you got into plastics. So
Right.
how did your career develop?
Well, my dad was in the Air Force. So my dad was a career test pilot in the Air Force, and he was in for 20 years. He got out because they weren't going to let him fly anymore. Basically, he was, 20 years in, time for a desk job, and what he got into the Air Force was to fly. So he got out in 1974, and we were living in Italy at the time. So my dad was stationed in France when I was born. So I was born in France in 1965. We were there for about a year. We came back to the U.S. My dad got sent off to Vietnam, and my sister was born in New Jersey at my mom's parents' house, essentially, in New Jersey. And then in 1968, after my dad got back from Vietnam, we got stationed in Italy. He wanted to stay in the Air Force. They wouldn't let him. Like I said, they wouldn't let him fly. So he retired. They kept him there. So we had a 6-year stint from 68 to 74 rather than moving him because he was going to retire. They kept us there. And so he retired in 1974. When he retired, my parents decided to stay in Italy. They didn't want to move back to the United States. They liked it there. It was the kind of the beginnings of the drug craze in the U.S. And so they said, we don't want our kids around that. Let's just raise them here. It's a lot better for family. And by that time, we always lived off base. So I spoke Italian. I'd speak Italian everywhere outside of the house.
How cool.
So, fluent in Italian. And I lived there until 1983. I came back to the United States for prep school. I wanted to go to college. So we thought at the time that, and when I was 15 years old, I just looked at my parents one summer and I just said, I want to go to college. Can I go back to school in the U.S.? Because I thought at the time, and it probably was true at the time, it's the opposite now. But if I wanted to go to college, I figured I needed to go to school in the U.S.
Were you already thinking medical degree at that point?
No, I wanted to be an international lawyer like my uncle was. But I knew I wanted to go to college. I knew I wanted to get a degree, and then, potentially go into, law school. Sometime in the early 80s, I kind of, floated the idea of maybe going to medical school. So my parents got me a job working for a plastic surgeon in Jacksonville through one of my dad's customers. My dad at this point was now flying corporate jets, and he was a jet pilot for, basically he was just he'd lease out his airplane, and, so they would hire him to fly him places. And one of his customers knew of a plastic surgeon in Jacksonville, Florida. So I worked for him for the summer. And I loved it. Said, okay, that's what I want to do. I graduated from high school in 1983, went on to college. I was a big time ski racer. So I stayed on the East Coast. I went to a Division I school, and graduated from college in 1987. Had to do a couple of years of remedial academic work because my first year of college was kind of a little bit of a disaster. So I went to graduate school in Philadelphia, got a degree and a master's in what's called a master's in applied human physiology. It was basically a program for people that wanted to go to medical school who didn't get in. So I did a 2-year master's degree program, got into medical school for the University of Miami, which is where my parents...
Go Canes.
So go Canes. And they lived in Florida. So I was able to apply 2 ways. I was able to apply to the University of Miami outside of what's called the AMCAS schools as a Florida resident, and then apply to the other schools as a Colorado resident. So there were 2 things that I wanted to do. I wanted to go to school either in Florida, I wanted to go to school in Colorado. So I got into the University of Miami, I didn't get into University of Colorado, so I ended up down
It
in.
was crazy. I grew up just outside the Gables.
Okay.
I'm a year behind you in school.
Okay.
So my senior year, the Canes won the national championship,
Yep.
if you remember.
Yep.
And
Well, and they won it again, what, 91 too.
Yeah.
And so, and I was at the Sugar Bowl that year.
Sweet.
So, anyway, so I went to school down there, finished school in 1993. I got a surgery program and I went back. So that's the Colorado thing. I ended up getting into a program in Denver, Colorado, St. Joseph's Hospital. And I did a year of internship. The Navy had paid for 3 years of my medical school. So that's where the Navy came in.
Is that through your dad's?
No, my dad didn't want me to do the Navy.
Well, I mean, through his GI Bill. Did you get that through your dad's GI Bill, or is that?
No. So my dad was, he was in from 54 to 74. That was before the GI Bill thing. So, but I got in. It's called the HPSP program, the Health Professions Scholarship Program. So they paid for 3 years of my medical school. So I owed them 3 years of active duty afterwards. There were two reasons why I joined the Navy. One was because they typically let people, when you get out of medical school, they would typically let you finish your residency and then bring you in with whatever training that you had. So if you went into family practice or plastics or ENT or, internal medicine or whatever, they typically let you go through and do your training and do your full residency and then pull you out. But it's always needs of the Navy. So after my internship year, during my internship year, they notified me and said, hey, you're going to have to come in as a primary care doc, as a general medical officer. So then I said, so the other reason, the second reason that I joined the Navy was because if I did have to go in as a GMO, then I wanted to go in as a flight surgeon. And their flight surgery program was the most, it allowed you to do as much flying as you could get in. So I think I was the last in 1994, so end of 93. I think I was the last flight surgeon to actually get enough of my flight credits in to actually solo in an airplane. So I got my solo flight, which I believe was the 14th flight. I had my solo certificate up. My parents were there. My dad was there. So
that's really cool.
I took off on an airplane, brought it back safely, landed it, flew upside down over Pensacola Beach. Just
What were you flying?
so it was a T-34 Charlie.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I
My
did that.
daughter's a pilot, so she's up at Utah State and got her pilot.
Oh, there you
license,
go.
so
Yeah.
I hear a lot about it.
Right. And so then I actually went, and from there with the flight that I had and the hours that I had and the credits that I had, I could have gone on and got my private pilot's license. But I stopped short. My dad was a career pilot, a test pilot and everything else. And it's a profession. And I knew so many people that had, that were docs or lawyers or, have a professional degree who just think that, okay, well, I'm smart enough to do this, so I'm also smart enough to fly an airplane, and get themselves in trouble. So I actually consciously made that decision. I did my cross country trip. I had all my hours. All I had to do was just sit and take my check ride, and I didn't do it. Because I just said I don't want to be in a situation where, I take my family somewhere and I got to get back for clinic tomorrow or whatever, and the weather's kind of iffy, and let's just do it and get back, and then crash your airplane, kill yourself, kill your family or whatever. So because I've known a lot of people that have done that.
Yeah.
So I quit. I stopped. I just stopped flying. That was, I guess, sometime 95, mid 90s. So I was in the Navy. I was a flight surgeon attached to a squadron in Meridian, Mississippi for 3 years. That's where I met my wife, Sherry. We got married in 1998. During that time that I was in the military, I was doing a lot of moonlighting. So that's where you're talking about the primary care experience. I was moonlighting at least twice a week in an ER, either overnight or weekends or on the days that I wasn't attached to my squadron or clinic or something. I would just, I'd work in an ER. So I got a lot of primary care experience. And then I continued that through my training and through my residency. I wasn't supposed to, but I did. So I was on call every other weekend. So once a month on my off weekends, I would fly I'd fly from Denver to Meridian, Mississippi, and I would work for, 32 hours, whatever it is. I was making good money. I was making more in that one weekend than I would in a whole month of my, residency salary.
Great.
So it kept us, kind of above board. My wife at the time, Sherry, was a nurse, so she was making some money. And so we were able to kind of, get by pretty well, in residency.
As a child, I grew up shooting BB guns. I was probably shooting my sister's dolls more often than anything else, but there was nothing like growing up and learning how to shoot accurately and learning how to take care of a firearm. There's no better way of doing that as a parent than being able to teach your children good firearm safety by using a BB gun or a pellet gun. Not only that, but it provides a lot of enduring fun for yourself as an adult and something you can do father and son or father and daughter. There are great equipment out there. We want to introduce you to Crossman. Crossman's been around for a long time. I've always had a Crossman growing up. Crossmans provide excellent accuracy and a lot of power for a BB gun. There's a lot of different styles to choose from different types of air rifles and pistols, even to fully automatic BB guns and other types of air guns. You need to go to the link in our description or click on the QR code that's coming up on your screen to be able to go to Crossman and make those BB gun purchases, those air rifle purchases. Again, it's going to supply you hours of fun and enjoyment with you and your kids, as well as you as an adult. And BBs are a lot less expensive than actual ammunition. So go to Crossman by using the link in our description or the QR code that's popping up on the screen and enjoy the accuracy, the quality of construction, and the hours of family fun that you will have with these air rifles and BB guns. Again, the link in the description, the QR code that's popping up on your screen, and then support our channel. Thank you.
And then in 2001, I moved to Idaho when I finished my training. And passed my written boards, passed my oral boards in 2002, and was in private practice there. Moved down here to this.
What took
He was a GP.
Yeah, what took you to Idaho? That's a big change from like Miami.
Well, I didn't like Miami. I hate the heat, and I like skiing. I told you I grew up skiing, racing, and so I wanted.
But there's no skiing in Idaho.
Well, I mean, we lived in Idaho Falls, so I was there was a small little ski area right literally 10 minutes from my house, which was Kelly Canyon. So I've been there a few times, but I would drive to either Grand Targhee or I'd go over to Jackson. And I started racing again. So I was kind of in an adult circuit, racing the circuit. And then in 2005, I moved down here and had a.
Oh, this is definitely where the skiing action is.
Yeah. So, and we were coming here all the time. That's why we moved. We were flying out of here. We were driving out of here. We were doing all kinds of stuff. So, it was always a step to either getting back to Mississippi or getting back to Florida or doing whatever. And so I had an opportunity in 2005 to move down here, and we took it. So it's 20 years ago.
20 years ago. So how many years in the military and private practice did you have in just family practice type of a role then?
So I was in the military for 3 years, and then I did the rest of my training. So from 97, so from 1994 essentially through 2001, so 7 years. 93 really, because I got a license in Georgia, and even when I was in, because it was the quickest license, I could have gotten one in Florida, but Florida took too much time. So I got a Georgia medical license, and I actually moonlighted in a hospital in Alabama. I got an Alabama license because I would go to Dothan, Alabama, and I would drive up there, and I think I did that. And they had like a small little hospital there where I would literally just drive in on a Friday night and leave Sunday night. And so I did that 2 or 3 times in 1993. And so from 93 to 2001, that's my military service and my residency training, where I was kind of still doing moonlighting in emergency rooms.
So that's quite a bit of years. And then at that point you move into plastics.
Yeah. So then in 2001, when I finished my training and I moved to Idaho Falls, that's when I was just a full-time plastic surgeon.
Yeah. So where were you in 9/11 then?
I had just moved to Idaho Falls. We were living in a rental house because we were waiting for our house to be, we had bought a piece of property with an old farmhouse on it, and we were getting it renovated. So we were just renting a place. And I was just getting up, and my wife, Sherry, just comes in, running in. She goes, you got to get up. You got to get up. There's an airplane just hit the towers. And I was like, what? And I got up and, and then I saw that and was watching it, and I saw the other second airplane hit the towers.
Yeah.
And that was kind of like, and then all the fallout from that. And it's just
surprising how fast that got out, because I know many people that watched this second plane, because I was in bed still. I worked evenings. Dad texted me or called me and says, there's a plane just hit the towers. And I said, what? Turn the TV on just to see
right
the second plane hit live.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people said. It's surprising.
Those really airplanes?
Yeah. It's just surprising how many people paid that much attention to turn the TV on that quickly. Because I know a lot of people that same thing, didn't see the first one, but all saw the second one.
Yeah.
I
don't know that many people really saw the first one ever anyway, because how would you have seen it unless you were there and happened to be looking up, right? And it certainly wasn't on TV, or maybe.
But the second one was only 15 minutes later. I'm just surprised that many people went to the TVs that quickly,
right?
And live saw the second one. Right. I mean, that many people paid attention.
The morning show, it was Good Morning America, and so I was just watching, and they were reporting, we've got word of, and then showing some stuff.
Yeah.
And then as I looked, I didn't know what I saw, because your brain doesn't think that's an airplane.
Well, it wasn't an airplane. I mean, you couldn't see the airplane. It was just a big hole in the building with fire, right?
Yeah, we got that on our actual introduction. So,
oh, do you?
Yeah, one of the big things, one of the big major events that happened.
What do you have to do to jump from GP to plastics? Do you have to go back and specialize?
So medical school is the same for everybody,
right?
And once you're out of medical school, then you can get your medical license after 1 year of kind of what they call postgraduate training. Okay. And you can do your postgraduate training and at the time, I think for me, if I remember correctly, were three things that you can do. You could do a year of surgical internship, a year of internal medicine internship, or you could do a year of transitional, where you didn't really know what you wanted to do. And if you didn't know that you wanted to go into some sort of surgical specialty or some sort of, internal medicine specialty or something, then you could do a transitional year, which would allow you then to make a decision during that year. Okay, do I want to do surgery? Do I want to not? But at the end of that, if you don't do any further training, then you can just be a GP. You can just be a general practitioner. You can put up your shingle and you can pretty much practice. In most states, you can pretty much practice anything that you want. You run into, I say, issues unless you have specific training in a particular field. Then you might probably are not going to be able to get kind of privileges or admission status or something like that at a hospital. So, if you want to go and practice general surgery at a hospital and take out, gallbladders and do hernia surgery and, bowel surgery and everything else, then you are going to have training in that for the hospital to give you quote unquote privileges.
So do you return to school or do you mentor under another?
So that's when you go back to training. And that's what most people do. Okay. Most people will go and do from that first year, they'll make a decision. And a lot of times people have already made a decision. I'd already made a decision. So I already knew that I wanted to go into plastic surgery. At the time, all we had was you had to do general surgery. And then from there, you go into plastic surgery as a subspecialty. And you could do anywhere from 3 to 6 years of general surgery. Most plastic surgery programs would allow you to apply to a plastic surgery program to go in after your third year, to go into plastic surgery. A lot of them required you to do a full 5 or 6 year general surgery program before they would take you as to do plastics. I got lucky in a sense that after my internship year when the Navy pulled me out, I was gone for 3 years. And when I wanted to get back in, I went back to the same institution that I was at before. And they had a guy there that they felt was going to either not finish his, he was starting his second year when I was starting my first year. because I had to go back and start again. I had to start over. And so I started again as an intern and was planning on doing, 3 to 5 years there. Again, just repeating my internship year. So I only would have lost 1 year. But there was a guy in that program that they were thinking wasn't going to finish or was going to leave and go somewhere else. And he did. Like two months into my internship year, Mark left and he went into anesthesia. And so they had a spot there. And so I was, because I'd already done my internship year, so it was just easy to slide me into that second year spot.
That's right.
So they slid me into that second year spot. And then I did that second year, third year. And during that time, I applied for a plastic surgery program and I got in. So I was able to kind of, really get the least amount of training that you could do to get into a plastic surgery program or to be a, board eligible, board certified plastic surgeon. So I did my internship year, then I did my second and third year from 97 to 99. And then I did my plastic surgery from 99 to 2001. So, it just kind of like...
And that's why a lot of people don't like being doctors, because you just described, 11 years?
Yeah, I didn't get out until I was 33 years old.
So is that how many years of training?
18.
18 years? Just...
Yeah, counting college, right? So I had college and graduate school and then medical school and then 5 years of training plus the 3 years in the military. So, yeah.
And people are like, yeah, I would love to make the doctor money, but 10 years, 18 years of schooling, that's...
Yeah, there's people out there that are making a lot more money than I am, believe me.
Oh, I know.
So that are not medics, that are not doctors, that are not lawyers. You just get out of school, go in, do some business stuff, start trading stocks, kind of do a little bit of money management, finance or something. That's when my daughter, she decided to go to college. She goes, Dad, what should I study? Just study general business knowledge, finance, marketing, and that's, I think to me right now is kind of like the, or computers, but she just wasn't into computers. So, I think that's just gives you your basic fundamentals that you can probably use in almost any field that you go into, even if you decide to go into medicine or, certainly accounting or,
business degree
or law, or into law school or anything like that.
Many a private practice and dentists and orthodontists wish they had some business.
Yeah, I did
come
too.
out going,
It's kind of right. You got to learn all that stuff on the fly. It's not, it's not very easy.
So now let's get up to, you've been practicing from 2001 till 2019. So you got 18 plus years practicing. COVID starts happening, and all of a sudden you're looking at this saying, this doesn't smell right, doesn't look right.
Well, look, I'm just nose to the grindstone, doing my job, not really paying much attention. I didn't know anything about COVID in 2019. I didn't really start hearing about it until 2020. But I used to follow a guy and do a little bit of options trading, and his philosophy regarding options trading was to just trade based upon current market events. And so I'd listen to his podcast when I was operating. So he would just sit there and he would talk, and it was a good, hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours, and you'd just hear all of his reasoning for why he was doing this trade. And a lot of it was, kind of, again, and it was all related at that time, it was all related to what was going on in China, what was going on across the world. What are we doing to, do this? And so that's how I heard about it. But that's really all I was getting, because I'm busy taking care of patients, I'm not going home and studying up on, viruses or anything like that. But you start seeing all the lockdowns, and you start seeing what is happening in Italy. And obviously with my history of Italy, it was very interesting to me. So I started paying a little more attention, and then Spain, and, they've had the full country lockdown in Italy. And then they start seeing, first case I think we had here in the U.S. was Seattle. And then you start hearing the stuff about New York. And then Andrew Cuomo's on TV. And it's just like all of this stuff. And so then you start seeing lockdowns, right? You start seeing, like, I think early March, you start seeing some of the first lockdowns in the U.S. I don't remember if it was New York or California, but one of those two states kind of started kind of closing things up, locking things down. Governor Herbert here started talking about lockdowns. And so I was just like, okay, it's coming. So it's middle of March, and March 17th was a Tuesday. And I got home, don't know what it was that I saw on my TV or, or on my computer or what, but I just kind of like, all right, we're going to be closing down here soon anyway. So I can't, by this time I'm raising my kids by myself. And so I was just kind of like, I can't bring this home. I don't know what this is. Can't get them sick. So I called up my office manager and I just said, hey, look, cancel all surgeries. We're going to shut down here soon. Let's just see how things go. So that was Tuesday, March 17th.
Which is what everybody's doing. Everybody was being ultra cautious because there just wasn't a lot of information out there. No one really knew what was going on. So everybody was taking this really seriously and just kind of believing everything that they saw on TV.
Yeah.
Because we didn't have information. I mean, I was right along there with you. I was traveling extensively because I would do major medical equipment. I was doing analyzers, hematology and chemistry analyzers, and immunoassay type of analyzers, and I was installing those across the country. Just had gotten back from, I was in Tampa installing a big system out there in Tampa when systems started coming and started closing things down. So, and I started hearing it from all over the place because I was traveling to different states. A lot of physicians were getting nervous about what was going to happen and start closing down. And they said they're starting to see symptoms walking in through their doors.
Well, I mean, I looked at it too, that I was going to be, even though I'm a physician, my office is purely aesthetic, purely, not
non-essential.
Right. I figured I was a non-essential business. And so if I stayed open, then I was going to quote unquote get into trouble. And at the time I was fully, I don't say fully on board. I was really nervous. I didn't know what this was. And so that's why I did it.
Do you have a governing body over plastic surgeons that filtered information down to you or anything? Like we have the American Orthodontic Association.
Yeah, no. I mean, yes, we have the American Society of Plastic Surgeons. We have the American Board of Plastic Surgery that would do that.
Because they were doing a daily briefing for us that I was responsible for watching to make decisions.
Yeah, I don't pay a lot of attention.
And when I told the doctor they're going to shut us down, he goes, they can't do that. This is the U.S. That's never going to happen. I'm like, well, I'm reading the briefing today, and they're predicting by Thursday we're going to be shut down. He's like, it's not going to happen.
And then did it?
Mm.
Yeah. So I again, I was worried. I didn't know what this was. You're seeing people keeling over. You're seeing all of the pictures of the incinerators in China that are burning overnight, and they see all these satellite pictures of all these hot spots in all the big cities, and they're claiming that this was kind of all the bodies that were being, that were being cremated from all of the deaths that they had. You started seeing, you have a town, you have a city, one of the largest cities in the world of Wuhan, China, which is seeing empty streets, and you're seeing all these videos of people kind of literally being welded into their complex, and it's just crazy. But that's what you're seeing. And so I closed March 17th. And I'll tell you, by the 19th, I had done a 180. I was studying, I was reading, I was looking at things I reviewed, went back and looked at, microbiology. I looked back at all of the basic science of what I knew, and what I refreshed myself and what I could remember and everything else. And I just, by the time that, 19th of March came around, so 2 days later, I literally had done a 180, and I was just like, this is completely fake. There's nothing to this. We can't, epidemics and pandemics are not possible. Then I start reading that they had changed the definition of a pandemic sometime in, 2017, 2018, just so that it could apply. And then I just, so I said, okay. And then what happens, right? All the mask stuff comes out. The first thing that comes out was there's no treatment. Okay. And that to me, and if you've watched any of my other stuff, that to me was the first flag. Okay. We're physicians, we're doctors. Somebody comes in, throw COVID out the window, throw anything else out the window. Somebody comes in, is complaining of a symptom. You as a physician are going to intervene. You're going to do something. Okay. You as a human being are going to do something. Somebody's complaining of being hurt, and you're not a doctor, and they have they just sprain their ankle stepping down on a step. Okay, you as a human being are going to intervene and help. You're going to get over there. You're going to help pick them up. You're going to lift them, put them on a couch, put some ice on it, elevate it, call a doctor, call somebody, whatever, right? You're going to intervene. So as a human, you're going to do that in general. As a physician, you're going to do even more. Okay, you have a knowledge base. You have, a baseline medical knowledge of viral and bacterial infections. We've treated viral infections and colds and flus symptomatically, since the dawn of time. And all of a sudden, this one here, there's no treatment. So that to me was the first flag. So then after I realized that this thing was fake, and then I was hearing this, there's no treatment for this, just wait until you're almost dead and then call an ambulance and we'll bring you in the hospital and treat you. And I think this was probably even before Remdesivir and before all the hospital protocols and everything else. I mean, it was when, you could see Andrew Cuomo talking about ventilators. We need more ventilators. And so I just, at that point, I just said, okay, now I got to figure out how am I going to treat people? Because I'm at home, my office is closed, I'm not busy, I'm not doing anything. So I just started looking at what could I do to treat people, because I had people calling me, friends, family, staff, patients still, hey, I've got a cold, I got a flu, or, I don't feel good. What do I do about it? And so that's when I just started researching and looking things up. Found Dr. Zelenko, found Dr. Peter McCullough, I found the FLCCC. I don't even know if they were FLCCC at the time. I think it was just Paul Merrick and Pierre Corey. America's Frontline Doctors. There was the two docs that I can see dressed in the black scrubs that were on that did a podcast about it and everything. I can't remember their names. Brian, I never remember his name, in California. He actually ran for Congress last time around. And Brian Tyson, and George Fareed had a clinic, and they were just seeing hundreds and hundreds of patients, and none of them were dying. They were treating them all with hydroxychloroquine, just like Radomir Zelenko was. So that's what I started doing. I was just kind of like, okay, if they're having success with it, then I can too. And so that's what I did. So that was the first thing when there's no treatment.
Well, that just sounds fishy to me, because I was hearing the same things. There's no treatment to this. I'm like, what flu doesn't have any treatment? Everything sounded identical to just a common flu, just a little bit more aggressive. I'm like, so...
Well, maybe more aggressive.
Maybe more aggressive. Well, from what we knew back then, everybody was saying, it looked like the common flu, just a little bit more aggressive is all it was.
Right.
And so I was questioning it. And like I said, I would come from medical, and one of the machines I sold most was the analyzers. And we'd had the PCR analyzers, and so I was selling a lot of in-clinic PCR analyzers, because we were doing a ton in infections. So whether it was wound care, or it was upper respiratory infections, or vaginal infections, or there's a number of other infections we were doing that we could all test on that. Foot funguses, nail funguses, all those things you could test on a PCR analyzer. And physicians were commonly sending stuff out for culture and getting the recommendation as to what medications, just like you were saying with the pathologist. But with this, you could actually find out exactly what was in there, because PCR analyzers was touted to be significantly more accurate than a culture was. But then it took a long time to get test results back, so not a lot of people were using PCR. But Thermo Fisher developed a little miniature one that we could install in a physician's practice, and then we could get them licensed with the state and stuff like that, so they could run their own tests. And so I was just doing tons of those things for infection testing. So, and we had been doing it for years before COVID ever came out. I'm like, well, let's just run it. And so we started running it on those things, that it was identical to just the common flu on a normal PCR analyzer.
Right.
And then we started getting word, like you were, from China, that just everything was shutting down. Everything was shutting down. They were even sending us pictures, and they'd send us pictures of how bad it was. You don't believe us? What? Look at this. And they'd email us pictures on WhatsApp, and he literally showed the guy I was working with over there, and a girl, their home residence where they lived. And it was a long street of just townhouses, just a facade of townhouses, nothing like we'd hear, just flat front buildings, and they'd have a sidewalk and then a street, just no front yards, no nothing.
Right.
Just a wall of townhouses. Chain link fences being put up by the cops. So literally you could walk out 3 feet out your front door and there'd be a chain link fence there.
Right. Well, that's what I was saying.
And
There were other places where they were welding people in, like they had
they were
apartment
chaining them
complexes.
in there.
Right.
And they'd chain them in there, and they could only get out certain times of day, and they'd have to go straight to work or straight home. And once they're in at night, they'd literally come down the streets and padlock everybody in. They were literally chained at home, and they show pictures of people after people after people just standing at these fences like they're in a cage where they couldn't go out into the streets, and said, this is my home. This is what we're dealing with right now. This is why I can't do anything.
And we were whining here. We were so blessed.
No, they were literally
Yeah,
people
well,
were climbing the
they were doing that
fences.
all over. They were doing that in Australia. They were, it was just
Weren't they doing that in New York and in the inner cities in the apartment complexes? Or was that just
good
the senior
question.
centers?
I think the senior centers are the ones that were being walled off from other people going in to see people. You had pictures and videos of people kind of visiting their family through a bay window or something, and just kind of like touching the window and kissing the window. And
Yeah, that's where it lost me, is when all of a sudden people couldn't go into the assisted living facilities and
Right.
see their family. Or you go into pregnancy, you're going to have your child, and all of a sudden dad can't go in there.
right.
I'm like, no, you completely lost me now. So I'm completely against whatever it is you guys are doing.
Right. Well, and then we had the masks, right? And we talked earlier about masks. I mean, the boxes originally said, that this doesn't treat viral infections. I know enough about masks, and as a matter of fact, I think New Zealand and Australia, when you're in an operating room, the only people wearing a mask are the actual surgeon and the surgical tech, or the nurse that's at the OR table, the circulator, the anesthesia person, and people walking in and out that are delivering instruments or supplies or whatever don't wear masks, because they know that it has nothing to do with it. The masks, and I mean, why do I wear it? Is it because I'm looking to protect the patient from me, crying on them? No, I wear because I'm protecting myself from anything that might splash up from the operating room table, whether it be fluids or, urine or stool or sputum or, whatever, blood. And so I knew that the whole mask thing was nothing. It was fake. I got into some fights with, some people on Twitter before I got canceled, with a doc that was in the UK somewhere. And he was just saying, well, you're a surgeon. You should know better. You should be wearing a mask and encourage other people to wear masks. I said, I'm not operating on people, and masks protect me from, the patient, not the other way around. I mean, unless I drool on the patient, or unless I spit on them, or unless I, decide to cry on them, I'm not giving them any of my problems. And there was study after study after study that showed that, that's not the case, that masks don't do anything for wound care, for wound infections, for complications, for anything. The only reason we wear them is to protect ourselves, from that fluid splash, not from anything else.
There's no particulates that it's going to screen out.
No.
None at all.
Right. And I used to say this all the time. It's not my saying. I've heard it from somebody else. It's like wearing a mask to prevent a viral infection is like putting up a chain link fence around your house to keep mosquitoes out. Okay. I mean, that's just, like I said, it's not my saying. I heard it from somebody, but, and that's what I used to say all the time.
Well, like I said, I got into supplying PPE to governments all over the country. And we knew down to the nitty-gritty the exact specs of every single mask, because we had to meet exact specs that the government required. And so we knew what SMS is, which means smelt blown, melt blown, smelt blown. It's 3 layers of fabric that has to be in the mask. Even if it's a high-quality mask or low-quality mask, they're all made of essentially the same stuff.
Right.
And you look at it, and all it is just different layers of cotton meshed in different patterns. And it doesn't keep anything out. In fact, I had one employee that was completely bought into everything they were saying. I'm like, these masks do nothing. Look at the material. I literally just tear it apart. This is keeping nothing out.
Right.
And they're like, no way. And I said, so I had them put it on, and then I had a skunk spray. And I sprayed it. I'm like, you smell that? Instantly, he says, oh, yeah, that's horrible. I'm like, okay, then.
Those are particles.
It's really nice. Look, there was an anesthesiologist that was on YouTube that was doing the same thing with a vape pipe. You know, he didn't have anything in it, just smoke, right? Just a vapor. And he put on a mask, he put on an N95 mask, he put on all the different masks that were out there, put on a bandana, did everything, and just showed that it was coming right through the mask, right around the mask. Was the exact same thing, whether he was wearing it or whether he wasn't. And, you know, and I was showing that video to everybody. And I was just like, look, that's
nothing.
It does absolutely nothing. I lost my hospital privileges because I wouldn't wear a mask going in, and they're still gone. I still haven't reapplied for them. And because I wouldn't wear a mask to go into the ER. You know, so they terminated my privileges, and then I walked in with a stack of papers. And I was supposed to meet with an administrator, with the department chair for surgery, and the chief medical officer of the hospital. And the chief medical officer and the department head of surgery came in. The administrator decided to just beg off. But I brought in a stack of papers, and they looked at me and they just said, "We don't care what your science is. This is just our hospital policy, and this is what we require." And so I walked out.
Yeah. Well, it really confused me because I know all the factories over there. I know how they make stuff. And so you'd have an N95, and then you'd have what was called a CN N95, which is the Chinese version of the N95. Then you'd have the construction masks, like the Macrites, that people use for like concrete dust and stuff like that. They're all coming off the exact same machine. The exact same machine. And then you have your little 3-ply ones. They just would recalibrate the machine a little bit and cut a little bit different. They're all coming off the exact same machine. Just like half your clothes, if you're buying something that's
the
Ralph Lauren
mask is the same one that I'm wearing in the operating room.
So your Ralph Lauren clothes or your clothes from Skechers or something like that is still coming off the same exact machines. When we used to buy clothes and import clothes, the same machines, they just put a different tag on it. They just white label it, right? It's all the same over in China. They don't care who it is.
Right.
And the gloves are the same thing. You get these really high expensive gloves from different manufacturers, and what lost me over here was one government official said, "I have to have this brand. If it's not this brand, I'm not going to willing to take it." And they were adamant. It had to be that brand. It had to have these specs on the box, had to be printed from the factory, and all this kind of stuff. And you know how stupid this was I would call the factory and say, "Can you print this on the box?" And they say, "Yeah, sure."
I just need a different box.
I just need a different box. Literally, that's all it took for me as a supplier, as an importer, and I was importing these by the millions. I need this to say this on the box. Can you put this on the box? And they say, "Yeah, sure." Done. 2 seconds later. Yeah, and they'd actually give us videos of them making it, because a lot of times when we were working with these state agencies, they said, "We want to see video of it." And I'd call them up literally on a WhatsApp, and "Can you take a quick video chat?" And they'd pop out their cell phone, video it, and literally just text it to me, and I'd show it to them minutes later. Like, there it is. I can supply this stuff. And it was an N95 1 minute, it was a CN95 the next minute, and it was a Construction Max the next minute, just a different shape. It was all the same.
I mean, I had people that I knew that were kind of, because there was a shortage of masks, and they were, you know, they're quote unquote N95 masks, which will filter 95% of everything, right? That's what they're made to do. But they're still not going to, you know, filter a 0.3 micron, you know, viral
Not
particle.
even close. Not even
Right,
close
right.
to that. They're microns.
We're talking about 95% for an N95 is it filters everything that is larger than a 5 micron size. So we're talking about something that is 0.3 microns or less.
We're talking it filters like saliva and blood.
Right. Anyway, and but they were, because there was a shortage of masks, what they were doing is that they were putting them in an oven, okay, right below melting temperature, to kind of cook them for 6 or 8 hours to kind of salvage the masks so that they could be reused. It was crazy.
The specs were stupid, and it completely lost me right out the gate, because some of the times they'd come up and said, "Well, we don't want it made in China. We want it made in Korea, or it has to be made in the U.S." I was like, okay.
Can you change the box? Made in USA?
Literally, that's what we would do. But in order to have it made in the USA, you has to literally be all it has to be is be assembled in the U.S. So they would literally ship it to us in just a plastic package.
Right, and then you'd box.
And then the boxes, then they'd ship us a box that said made in the U.S. all
And the
flat.
media would glorify these
And we would
companies
just
that were assembling masks. Look,
Put the
they're
box
helping
together,
out.
put it inside the box, say it was assembled in the U.S., and hand it to them. There you go, made in the USA. And everybody was doing it that way. Everybody was doing it that way. Or we would have a made in China, ship it to Korea, and then have the Koreans put it in the box for us and say it was made in Korea. It's all still made in China because there's no factories anyplace else. There's no factories in the United States that make masks. There's no factories in Korea that made masks. It's all made in China, everywhere. China's the only place that has factories. And particularly for the prices they want, because they wanted them dirt cheap. And a lot of us suppliers there are saying, you guys are gouging us because you're selling us an N95 was 7 cents a mask before COVID. Now it's $1 a mask. We're like, that's what China's charging us for. So they're the ones gouging the rest of the freaking world.
Right.
Because we were putting 10, 15 cents, 20 cents on it per mask. And it's coming out of China, $75, $1 a mask. They're making freaking bank over there.
Right.
And a lot of people just don't understand that importing world. And I did importing for 10 plus years. And so I know what those factors are doing over there. You can't tell me I don't. So the other thing I really want to get into with you is the other thing that I knew from that Wuhan lab over there and from my inside sources, and a lot of people don't know this, is the vaccine, the mRNA vaccine was created long before the actual virus was.
Look, my statement that I've said all the time, and I believe I even said it on Tucker, but I've said it in most of my podcasts, is COVID was invented for the vaccine, not the other way around.
Exactly.
Okay.
So I've been preaching that from day one.
They wanted to launch this mRNA technology on the human population, on humanity. And so therefore they invented the COVID disease in order to launch the vaccine.
Yeah, exactly. And you're confirming that as a physician. So from day one, from when it first started, you can ask any of my employees. I said, this is what's happening. The mRNA vaccine already existed. It's been out there for a long time. It's a DNA-based vaccine, which means it's literally going to go into your body. It's going to program your white cells to produce in a certain way when it sees a certain protein. And what they want is they want a permanent patient. Because now that they program your...
Well, they've wanted that since they started vaccines in general, right? I mean, they've been poisoning us since the 1940s, 1950s.
It's all about the money. Because if they can get a permanent patient...
Right.
Then it just money, just some money machine.
The polio vaccine was exactly that. Okay. One of the guys that came out and invented this, and Jack Cruz talks about it. The polio vaccine was, Alton Ochsner from LSU, and everything is named after him down there. Okay. The Ochsner Medical Center, whatever. Okay. He was instrumental in the development of the polio vaccine. Bernice Eddy tried to blow the whistle on him, saying that the polio vaccine was contaminated with DNA, and she is the first that I know of real bad. I mean, look, you can say Semmelweis as well, was canceled, but Bernice Eddy from our times, okay, in the late 1950s was the first one that was canceled by our own government, okay. Because she exposed the contamination that was in the polio vaccine, and they knew that they were injecting DNA, SV40, simian virus 40 DNA, and promoters causing cancer in people. They actually, Jack Cruz will tell you this, that and Judith Berry Baker, who's still alive, actually. She will tell you that they were doing this, and they were doing it on purpose because they were trying to develop an injection that could get into Cuba to inject Fidel Castro and kill him. And so they actually gave it to a prisoner. I don't know if it was in Texas or Louisiana, they gave it to a prisoner to see whether it was going to work or not. And it did. It killed him. Like 3 months later, this guy died with cancer. And, again, Dr. Jack Kruse talks about it. Okay. It's not my story, it's his. And so they did that in the 50s. Okay. And they injected, and the reason why the first polio vaccine got taken off the market was because eventually that came out. But in the meantime, hundreds of thousands, millions of people were contaminated with this. And that's where cancer started. Okay. The American Cancer Society was started by Alton Ochsner. All right. And he was the first chairman of the American Cancer Society. Why did he do that? Because he knew it was coming. Okay. So that just goes and tells you the corruption that's involved in all of this right from the get-go. Okay. In all vaccines.
So corrupt. So when Moderna and Johnson & Johnson came out with their vaccine and they said, oh, we put this together in record time, I was screaming at the TV. I'm like, that is such a lie.
Okay.
Fauci knew they had it. They've had it from the beginning.
Fauci told us that in 2017.
Yeah.
There will be an epidemic during this administration in 2017.
Well,
He told us it was coming.
He's heavily invested in the RNA side of it. Because, like you were saying,
The CDC owned half of the Moderna patents.
yes, because they knew that they couldn't get an RNA vaccine accepted by CE in Europe or the FDA here in the United States without emergency measures.
Right.
There's no way they'd approve it.
Right.
Nothing mRNA would.
All the studies for anything on the mRNA or on the lipid or the lipid nanoparticle, the LNP, all of the studies in 2020 that I read, okay, prior to this, all of the animals died in those studies, every one of them. And they'll tell you, well, they were euthanized so that we could see what the tissues were. No, they either died from the injection that they gave them, or they died from re-exposure to whatever it is, the disease that they were trying to treat them for. And that's, to me, when the COVID vaccine was announced in, May, June of,
3 months after it comes out,
Right.
they had a vaccine.
Well, they're saying, hey, nothing's going to get back to normal until we get a vaccine. That, to me, was, that was the final straw for me from the standpoint of this is all fake. This is all done on purpose. And I was just like, okay, now I'm just going to tell everybody. And then, the difference to me, which we can get into, but the difference to me was I was 1989 when I started medical school. I got shingles from a hepatitis B vaccine. That was my last vaccine. I've never had one. I never gave any of the military people. I never gave them any vaccines. I just told people to avoid it. You don't need it. They wanted to get a vaccine. They could go and get it next door with the other doc or the nurse or whoever it was there. But I never gave a vaccine, even in the military. The only other vaccine I ever got was in 2011 when I went to Ghana on a humanitarian trip, and I couldn't get into the country without getting a yellow fever shot. And so that was the only one. And I even tried to bribe the nurse at the state here in Salt Lake City at the state, vaccine center. Hey, I'll give you, I'll give you some money. Just don't inject that into my arm. I can't do that. It's like, okay, well, I haven't had a vaccine since 1989, right? So 22 years, I'll probably be okay. And for all I know, maybe some people think I'm not okay, but I'm still okay.
Well, I know that there was a protocol circulating. It was emailed to me of what to do if you had to get the vaccine in order to keep your job, travel, whatever. There was a protocol that came out to help get it out of your system.
You can't get it out of your system.
Not mRNA.
Okay. It's in your system permanently. And that's why I said, nobody, don't ever take it, because you are hijacking your own cells to make proteins forever.
It's like a computer program.
Yeah, you're installing a computer program into your cells. I mean, it's going to stay in your arm. What other injection do we do that stays in your arm? We inject antibiotics to circulate through your body to kind of treat an infection. Nothing that you inject in somebody's arm is ever going to stay in
Stay localized.
All other vaccines that you're injecting them because you want the systemic effects. When you inject something in the body, you want a systemic effect, and you want that effect to happen faster than if they were to take it by mouth or any other route. Okay, and that's medicine. Okay.
What about the efficacy of the tetanus shot? How do you feel about that?
No shots, ever. Okay, there's just I don't think anybody, look, there was never a baby born in the United States with a vaccine deficiency. Okay. So I don't think vaccines work. I don't like any of them. None of them have ever been studied. There is not one randomized placebo-controlled study of any vaccine that is currently on the market right now, ever.
So what do we tell critics that say, and this is what I hear people, no, the vaxxers who say, not polio, but let's say
Measles.
but mumps and rubella. Yeah, there was just
Look, what happens when you get the measles?
you get spots.
Okay. And then what happens?
You're immune.
Okay. The spots do what? They go away. Okay. And you have a little fever. You don't feel very good. You stay home from school for a couple of days. You have the measles. Spots go away. You go back to school. Now you're immune to it. Okay. What happens when you get chicken pox?
Yeah,
Same
we.
Why are we injecting anybody? Why are you injecting anybody with anything unless it's a absolutely deadly disease? And even then, you've got to look at the risk-benefit, relationship around it. Okay. There has never been I'll say it again. There has never been a placebo-controlled, an inert placebo-controlled randomized study done on any vaccine that is currently on the market right now. Some people argue and they'll say, well, the COVID vaccine had a placebo. Yes. But as soon as they announced that it was 94 or 95% effective, they gave it to all the people in the placebo-controlled study on the placebo arm. Okay, so now they ruined the study on purpose, in my opinion, so that they can't then look back at that data and go, hey, this is how much better it was or how much worse it was. They did that on purpose. Fauci did it on purpose. Said, oh, now that we know that it's 95% effective, let's give it to everybody else. What they won't tell you is that the 95% effective that they claimed was a relative risk ratio. And when you actually look at the absolute risk ratio, which means you have the people in the control arm that didn't get the shot, and you have the people in the treatment arm that did get the shot. Okay, the absolute risk ratio is, okay, how many of those people in the placebo arm get the disease, and how many of the people over here in the control arm get the disease, okay? And it's actually less than 1% difference, okay? 0.8% was the absolute risk ratio for the Pfizer study, okay? And they never published that. And it may have been in the study, but we didn't get the study until 2022. We didn't get the data from the study. Anything that they put out in 2020 and 2021 was all talking about the relative risk ratio, okay? And we know in science that you don't look at it. I mean, Fauci himself he's talked about it, and scientifically, statistically, the absolute risk ratio is what we should be looking at, not the relative risk ratio. So,
how much has he admitted to post now?
Nothing. Deborah Birx has admitted in her book, she actually wrote it, that a lot of what they were talking about in early 2021 regarding the launch of the vaccine was based on hope that it was going to work. And I'm paraphrasing, but she was saying that we just hoped, that with everything that we knew, we were just kind of had a lot of hope that it was going to work. Those are her words. That's our science. That's Fauci, Mr. Science, when he's claiming, that, he knows what he's talking about and that you don't know science. It was all a facade. It was all done to launch the vaccine, to get depending on how far down that rabbit hole you want to go. I remember Vladimir Zelenko was one of the first ones. Michael Yeadon also was talking about this being a bioweapon. And I remember thinking to myself, and maybe even saying it out loud, you were screaming at your TV. I mean, I was screaming I don't watch TV that much unless it's a football game or something, but I was yelling at my computer screen, or at a podcast, and I was just sitting here just going, it's all fake.
Kind of bring it back down to it. Yeah, so you have two different, the way I picture it, and the way I've explained it to other people is you got two different types of vaccines. You got what's called a culture-based, where they've designed and developed like polio and these measles, mumps, rubella. Right. They developed in a petri dish, and that was all culture-based. mRNA, the COVID, wasn't culture-based. It wasn't egg-based. It wasn't something they grew and studied. This is an RNA-based vaccine. That means when you inject it, it's literally programming your DNA, the mRNA within your DNA, to produce a certain spike protein within the white blood cells every single time they see a certain virus. So as the virus comes into your body, they recognize it, they produce this protein that combats that. Problem is now every single time they see that, they produce the same protein strand to fight it. Problem is viruses mutate every 3 to 4 months, maybe.
Yeah.
Some of them faster, some of them slower, 6 months. So 3 to 4 months later, their vaccine was already outdated because the virus will have already mutated. So then they started coming out with, well, now you got to get the booster, or you got to get the second injection. And so that's how they get the permanent patient, right? Because now the booster's got to adjust the spike protein that they inject into you, so it produces the protein slightly different for the mutation. The problem is now they'd have to do that every 6 months. You'd have to be getting a shot because your body no longer can produce
there's
correct
never,
spike
right. But there's also
correct protein on its own.
Even with your traditional vaccines, okay, they talk about, you used to be able to get a waiver if you would go in and get an antibody for, the measles. You could say, hey, look, let's just check your antibody level, and if it's above a certain number, then, we'll give you a waiver and you don't need to get the measles vaccine. Because that means you've been exposed to it, presumably means you've been exposed to it.
Your own immunity.
Producing your
natural immunity, okay? The problem is that even with that argument, and even though you're measuring antibodies, it's never been shown in any study that a level of antibodies above 100 or 500 or whatever scale you want to look at, that you're actually immune to that disease. It's an arbitrary number. It's kind of like the argument that I have with expiration dates on food, okay? There's never been a study done on anything, okay, on any expiration dates on anything. You look in your refrigerator. I get in this fight with my, my kids and my fiance and everything else. I mean, it's just kind of like they look at the date. You pull out a half gallon of milk and you look at the date. You go, oh, let's just throw it away. You still got, and it expired yesterday. And, you just kind of like you open it up, you smell it, and it smells good. Let's drink it. I mean, there's never been a study on anything on any of these expiration dates. And the same thing. There's never been a study on these arbitrary, antibody numbers. And so that's what some of the stuff is that's going around now. They're measuring antibody levels, that your body has that are circulating to the COVID, virus. Okay. But what does that tell you? Like you said, is it what COVID virus? Is it is it the one from 6 months ago, or is it the one from 2 years ago?
Yeah. Exactly.
And on top of that, the one study that was, I think it was the study, the Drosten study done in February of 2020, maybe it was January, but the sequencing and the PCR test and everything else, the article that was written, was submitted, reviewed, and published. So submitted, reviewed, approved, and published in less than 48 hours. Okay.
Not possible.
Exactly. Okay.
Not feasibly possible.
Right. So, again, all fake. Okay. And so you have this quote unquote PCR test. Okay. That was actually, and you go and look at the article that he wrote, the article in it, they said that they did not even sequence the actual virus. They only sequenced what they thought was another virus from a previous sample of, I think of one patient. Okay. So they didn't even sequence what they thought was a COVID patient. They sequenced what they thought was another patient that had a similar illness. And then they made a fraudulent PCR test from that. And that guy made millions. He's now like the director of infectious disease for the World Health Organization or something. And I mean, the whole thing is it was just nothing but a facade. It's all fake.
Well, then I have a question. You said that the vaccine is going to recognize every time you get the virus, it's going to
recognize it, but then it's not going to be able to produce anything but the protein that the vaccine told it.
So what
to.
happens?
No, it's not even. But you're not even at the
Your
mRNA
body
stuff is not going to be in response to that. What the problem with the mRNA technology is that you are constantly producing that. It's not being produced in response to being something that you're exposed to. It's constantly producing it.
So if that, so say a patient has received the vaccine, maybe they're getting boosters, I don't know. Every time they get COVID, because you have these people that say, oh, I got COVID again. I'm like, are you sure it's not, you don't just the flu? What harm is it doing to that patient every time they get sick again?
Well, so my opinion right now is that you have hijacked your own immune system to the point where your own immune system is, you are in a chronic state of autoimmunity in your body, and you have different levels of autoimmunity. Now, the good thing is that I think there's a large percentage, two things. One is there's a large percentage of people out there that got nothing but a placebo anyway. Okay.
Really?
There was a study done in Denmark 2 or 3 years ago that said that 95% of the complications came from a certain lot number of their, of their vaccines. It was 80%, 15%, and then 5%. There was one series that didn't have hardly any complications other than like soreness from the injection. Okay. So, it was like 3 tiers, but the vast majority of them came from a certain lot number. As a matter of fact, that was, and somebody did a study on when I went to trial over my stuff. They had to, they presented all of the lot numbers that I had received, and there were, I want to say, 47 deaths just from that one lot number that was given to me.
So they would have shut down that entire thing and stopped, and they never had recall. They never had anything.
No, they're still running it.
Yeah.
Right. And again, depending on how deep you want to get, some people will say that those were specifically sent to the red states, okay, over the blue states. And so that's why there's a lot of people in the blue states that didn't have the complications because they were essentially getting a placebo. And you go back and you look at some of the people, I mean, you're involved in manufacturing and production and, and everything else. There is no way, okay, that we could produce the number of vaccines with the number of factories that were there running 24/7, 7 days a week, round the clock, production time. There's no way that they could have produced that number of vaccines.
But if you became very ill after getting the vaccine, you probably got
the vaccine.
So I have a loved one who had to, chose to get it because they worked for a county. That county said, you don't get the vaccine, you can't work for us. You will lose your job. So they get it, makes them very ill, and now they have permanent heart problems.
Yes. So they got one of the contaminated or one of the purposely, developed vaccines to kind of hurt people.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I believe that it was done on purpose to cull humanity. And the powers that be, Candace Owen calls them the depraved. Some people call them the elites. I don't like the term elite either because they're not elite in anything. But the depraved, they want to cull humanity. They believe that the 8 billion people that are on Earth are way too many, and they can
population.
They can depopulate. They can depopulate the Earth and run it with 500,000 people. The Georgia Guidestones said it, and it's funny how the Georgia Guidestones just disappeared. Right? They show up overnight and they disappear overnight. I
trace it all back to money. It's always been
money and control.
Money and control. So I mean, what happens with your body is, if you don't do anything, don't take any vaccines, then you develop a natural immunity to it, or natural, it's not even called immunity, it's just your white blood cells recognize it, and they can mutate with the viruses as they come in. Mm-hmm. But once you have an mRNA vaccine, your white blood cells stop mutating, and they just kind of go with the programming of the vaccine. And so the additional viruses will affect you more and get you more sick.
Well, and when you do get sick, you have a heightened level of immunity already in your body. And so now you can't fight that because your body is already fighting something as a baseline.
Yeah, it's already fighting.
You now get more sick because your body is, you're let's just say if you have a 0 to 100, your immune system's already at 62. Okay, and you need 40 points in order to fight this disease. you don't have 40 points available, so you're going to get super sick. Does that make sense? I mean,
Yeah.
I'm just trying to use
Well, I
analogies,
only ever
so.
got it the one time, and I've been around people with it since and think, oh, great, now I'm going to get, I don't have
Look,
time to take
you
off
can talk
work,
about viruses.
and I don't get
There's-
it anymore.
There's never been a study that proves transmission of a virus. Okay. And you've seen this in your own life, where your husband gets sick and you don't. You get sick and your husband doesn't. Your kids get sick and you don't, and vice versa. Yeah, sometimes you do get sick, but is that due to them or is it due to the environment that you're in and around? What was it that made that one person sick to begin with? Chances are it wasn't another individual. Okay, chances are it's something involved in the
Well, I don't want my husband watching this because I get on him for not washing his hands enough when he's sick. Because I don't want to get sick. I get sick every time he gets sick.
Yeah.
Has nothing to do with him washing his hands.
One of the things I learned growing up as a kid, and particularly in Scouts, was to be prepared. And particularly when it comes to my feet. You do not want to be out in a situation where your feet are incredibly uncomfortable and makes you absolutely miserable, makes the rest of the day absolutely miserable. So you have to go out there in the right equipment, whether that's hiking in the mountains, whether that's fishing on the stream, it's working out in your garden or out in the yard, or it's going out on the town or to the nearest rodeo in a nice pair of boots. You have to go out prepared so you look good, feel good, and most importantly, it is comfortable. Because again, there's nothing like being miserable walking around all day long. We want to introduce you to 3 different companies that are supporting this channel. We have Durango Boots, which provides the best Western wear and boots that money can buy. So you'll have the look, the feel that you want. There's also Rocky Boots for that great mountain wear, that hiking wear, and just getting out into nature and being prepared for what you're confronting. And then there's Mucky Boots or Muck Boots, which will provide the perfect waterproofing that you need for fishing, hunting, and again, getting out in the yard and working in the mud. These are great companies that supply a great pair of boots for you for any need, for any occasion. So again, go to the link in our description or click on the QR code that's coming up on your screen for any of these great sites, whether it's Western wear, whether it's the outdoor wear and getting up into the hills and the mountains, or whether it's muck wear that you need to be able to work around the garden or go fishing or hunting and not walk around with wet feet. These are great products at great prices that will keep you perfectly comfortable all day at the same time that you're looking good. So trust these products, whether it's Durango, whether it's Muck Boots, or whether it's Rocky Mountain Boots or Rocky Boots, and go to those sites using the link in our description or QR code that's popping up on your screen. Again, the link in the description or QR code that's popping up on your screen, and support our channel. Well, I just saw that, and the second I saw them pushing that mRNA vaccine, I'm like, this is all about money. Because once they have the mRNA approved, now they can just reproduce those boosters year after year after year. It's become your next flu shot where it's just a solid paycheck because they could just produce that year after year after year, and you have to get just as much as you get a flu shot.
Right.
But I'm looking at the flu shot. I'm like,
well, that's why
what's the
they
difference
that's why they
between this and
that's
the
why
flu
they
shot?
said hydroxychloroquine doesn't work. That's why they confiscated
They want the money.
hydroxychloroquine. That's why they confiscated all the ivermectin. That's why they were shutting people down. They can't
I've been
enforce
stocking
the
up
PrEP
on
Act.
ivermectin.
They can't enforce the PrEP Act. Okay, if there's a treatment for something, they can't. They can't create an emergency use authorization unless there's not a treatment for something. And so then that's when they did that. Then the vaccine was coming. But I was willing, to stand on the sidelines, just like I have with other vaccines, until 2021 when they started mandating it. And then when they started mandating it, and really the biggest impetus to me was my daughter was going to college that year, and I'll say the school, Arizona State, was requiring her to be vaccinated.
Everybody.
So yeah, all schools.
After the employers where people are losing their jobs right, left, or not taking it.
Right. And, so, selfishly, that's part of what I was doing. Okay. But I did it for my patients. I did it for my staff. I did it for anybody and everybody that was, that didn't want it. I was just giving them a card. And I did that through.
Oh, so you weren't giving them a placebo. You were just giving them the card.
For anybody, initially for anybody over the age of 15, I was just giving them a card. And then kids under the age of 15, I was giving them a saline shot because, theoretically, hypothetically, they would go into school and,
I got a shot.
yeah, and the other kids would show their COVID card and they go, my arm hurts. And the other kid would go, why does your arm hurt? I got my card and, you got a shot. So I didn't want that. I didn't want to get them embarrassed and then have them get the third degree, and go down that route.
Because we got the notice from the health department, we would like you to be dispensing. We're an orthodontist office, but they'd shut us down. And then they said we were essential because we have people with appliances in their mouths. You are essential. You must go back to work now. And we'd like you to provide the vaccine. And the doctor's like, no.
I never got that. I had to ask for the vaccine. I had to tell them that I could treat a certain number of people. Originally, I told them that I couldn't treat that number, or they asked me how many people I would be able to affect and I'd be able to, inject in a week's time or a month's time. And I just gave them some, lowball number because I just didn't want, and they said, oh, well, I don't think that you're going to meet the criteria. We need to have people that are going to be able to do more. So I said, well, I see 100 people a week. And if that's the case, then, okay, well, in that case, then here, we'll send you a form, sign it off, and here you go. So, so that's how I did it. And that was in April, May of 21. But yeah, I was, it was just kind of like, I was happy to just stand on the sidelines. But then when they kind of started mandating this and making everybody have it. And, it was already a travesty enough to where you couldn't go and do things that you were supposed to do. Couldn't go to a movie. You couldn't go to a concert. You couldn't go to a ball game. You couldn't go to a hockey game. You couldn't go anywhere, without a COVID card. And I tell people this all the time. There were no COVID laws. There were never any laws passed by Congress anywhere in any state or in our federal government that said, you have to do this. Okay. It was all mandates from our government and mandates from the CDC. And the CDC is an advisory agency. Okay. That's their charter. Okay. Their charter is an advisory agency. They advise their jurisdictions, and there's 64 jurisdictions. There's 50 states, and then there's separate health departments, 14 other health departments for probably, Indian tribes, and probably some of the larger cities have their own health department that's separate from the rest of their state health department. But there's 64 jurisdictions. And so the CDC, since 1947, 1948, when it was first established, has been an advisory agency only. Okay. But what's happened is that anything that they say in that time frame in the last 70 years, essentially, they've, come out and said, well, whenever the CDC says something, we have to do it. Okay. And that's been the MO, that's just been, okay, when the CDC says add this, then everybody adds it. So it's kind of become a quote unquote lawful agency, right? And that's what my indictment said when the FBI came and raided me. My indictment said that I was violating the lawful governmental functions of the CDC. And I was just that, when I read that, and it was in there over and over and over again. And I was like, what are the lawful governmental functions of the CDC? And I even challenged that in my motion to dismiss. And the judge said, even though they don't have any lawful governmental functions, he just kind of like blew over that. He just kind of like said, no, it's coming from a government agency, and therefore it's a lawful governmental function. I mean, he kind of flipped it around and said, even though they don't have the ability to legislate, even though they have the ability to establish law, okay, they can tell you what to do. I'm like, wait a minute, they can't do that, right?
Our mandates in this county were coming from, the health department,
right?
A non-elected official.
Correct. And actually, we went to the state and we actually peeled that back. That the Utah Health Department used to be able to, and they did. They established the mask mandates here in Utah. Okay. We fought them, and I went and testified in Congress a couple of times about masks and the effectiveness, et cetera. And we got a law that passed that said if the Utah Health Department wants to put a mask mandate in place, then they only have 30 days in which to do it. They can't do it permanently, because originally it was just like, okay, here's a mask mandate
until we
tell you that you can take it off. And so we went and passed a law that peel that back. I said, well, if you want to pass that, then you have 30 days. And if the law is not passed and you don't run it through the legislature, then your mask mandate then falls by the wayside. And they haven't done it since. Okay. So that was part of my, my commitment to what it was that I was doing. And that was going to be part of my defense against this. And that I'm not trying to, I wasn't trying to defraud anybody, because that's what they claimed that I was.
Yeah.
I wasn't trying to defraud anybody. I was just taking care of my patients.
Yeah,
to the
nobody
best of my
came
ability.
to you and said, I would like the vaccine, and you said, wah, ha, ha, ha. I'm not
Right.
going to give it to you.
Right.
Which is what I see going around once the case was dropped. That's what I'd see, the comments. Is that people
even
were
before
going
that.
in, to get, and they're just.
Well, yeah, so there were, again, we've advanced a little bit, but
So I jumping around.
yeah. So, I did the vaccines for about a year and a half. I started just by giving the cards. Then I wanted to be, I guess some people came to me and said, look, you need to be a little bit more careful because you're violating the law. And I was like, what law am I violating? That was my fundamental, thing, is that I'm not violating any laws. I'm just taking care of my patients, and a medical record is it's not like a legal record. And on top of that, what I was getting at before is the only law that was violated here was a HIPAA law, medical privacy laws. Those are the only laws that were violated, because having a clerk at a grocery store demand that you tell her your medical condition or what it is that you've had done is actually a HIPAA violation.
Big HIPAA
Okay?
violation.
And so prior to 2020 or 2021, you weren't allowed to do that, and you could get thrown in jail for that. Okay? If you require somebody to disclose a medical, and as a matter of fact, there was a lawsuit against Harmon's here by a guy who the Harmon's tried to kick him out for wearing a mask, and he won the lawsuit. Okay, because he walked in and said, no, you cannot ask me. I have a medical condition that requires me that I'm allowed to not wear a mask. And they said, well, then you can't come in. Or what is your medical condition? And the guy's like, you are not allowed to ask me that. And he won that lawsuit. Okay, so that's the only law that was violated, was to require you to disclose your medical condition and to go somewhere, or require somebody to ask you your medical condition to kind of come in and do that. That's the only law that was violated out of all of this. And I didn't violate that law. So that was going to be part of my argument. Unfortunately, throughout the whole process, they basically hamstrung me, tied both hands behind my mouth and gagged me to the point where I wasn't going to be able to even talk about that.
And people don't realize how strong the HIPAA law is. It is.
It's supposed to be.
It's incredibly strong, because we could get in trouble all the time. Because I was running DNA tests and stuff like that. We were doing pharmacogenetic tests and cancer screenings and stuff like that as part of a lot of the medical stuff we did. And we'd have it where a patient would say, hey, or a doctor would say, hey, can you just email me that test result real quick?
Right.
And you're like, I can't have that test result in my email, because if it is, it's a HIPAA violation, particularly if you didn't have a HIPAA compliant email. So I had a HIPAA compliant email, so I was emailing those all the time, but my employees didn't. And so they'd have to email it to me, and I'd have to, so they would limit the number of eyes on it, or else you could get sued. It was, you can have.
There's people get sued about HIPAA violations all the time.
All the time.
It's just kind of like Medicare and CMS would show up at people's offices and slap them with huge fines over violations of HIPAA, laws.
Well, I have a problem with the HIPAA law in general, because it's backwards to me. It should be the patient going to the practitioner and saying, this is how you may share my information. Why do I hold a copy of my patient telling them how I can share their information? I hold the only copy. They don't have one.
Right.
So they can say, I never signed that. Well, show me proof you never signed. You don't have any proof. Right. I just think it's backwards.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So a lot of stuff is backwards.
A lot of people didn't even understand PCR either. They thought, PCR, there's this glorified test. You understand, PCR is it's a polymerase chain reaction, and all it is the machine itself is just a glorified microwave. It's all
it makes a little bit of something into a lot of something.
Exactly. Okay. So they take a little bitty DNA strand, about this big, however big it is, and then you put it in a microwave, and you heat and cool it until it multiplies. And so now you're literally just photocopying the DNA strand. Then you take it up against known DNA strands of known diseases. Well, it's measles, mumps, rubella, MARS, or SARS, or whatever disease it is, and they compare the two. And that's all it is just a comparison. Which one does it match to?
Right.
Does it match that DNA? And that's all a PCR machine is. And it's incredibly accurate if you have the DNA of the disease you're trying to compare it against.
And, right. So if you have the DNA of the disease that you're trying to compare it to, but it's still not a method to tell whether somebody's infected or infectious, okay? Because even if it's there, it doesn't mean that that person is sick with it.
No, because you could have it and 0 signs, 0 symptoms.
Right. And they had to, depending again how far you want to go down the rabbit hole and everything else, they had to kill Kary Mullis, who was the inventor of the PCR, won the Nobel Peace Prize for it, or the medical, the medical prize, Nobel is a Nobel laureate for the PCR test. And he was claiming that's exactly what he was saying. Okay. So in 2019, he just happens to just die. Okay. From like a heart attack or something.
Yeah.
Okay. Because they had to get rid of him because he was going to be very vocal. He did not like Anthony Fauci at all. As a matter of fact, there's a video that's all over the place. It talks about how, he called, just called him out, said Anthony Fauci is just one dumbass. He doesn't know what the hell he's talking about.
The other problem you have with the PCR thing is they had to actually put a cutoff on it, because a PCR could get so accurate that you could detect just a minuscule, and it'd be, you have it, but you really don't know how much of it you have because it detects everything. And they had to put a cutoff that you had to have a certain density of
number of cycles,
of cycles within it, or else.
Well, so
everybody would have it. In other words,
my point, and that's the point, is that you can take such a small amount of something, okay, and then you can always, depending on the number of cycles you run, you can always find that in there.
Yeah.
Okay. And so if you run it under 35 to 40 cycles, which is what they were running the PCR test, it was inaccurate because it was basically
finding it in everybody.
It was finding it in everybody. It was finding it in oranges. It was finding it in papayas. It was finding it in a can of Coke. There was that guy in Zimbabwe or somewhere out there that actually got on TV or on podcast or whatever, and he submitted all of these things, and they, like 3/4 of them came back, and it was just fruit and, Coke and whatever and everything else. And then, 6 months later, he's dead.
Because it literally could detect just the smallest little tiniest thing. So they had to put a cutoff. It says, no, you have to be above this.
Right. So you're supposed to have it. And as a matter of fact, and Kary Mullis talked about this too, it had to be less than like 18 cycles or something like that. You had to find it in less than 18 or 20 cycles, because anything that you found over that was going to be a false positive because it really wasn't there. And you were creating enough of something else that it was measuring, and then multiplying it enough to create, that you actually could see it. So so they were doing 36 to 42 cycles in the United States.
Yeah, that's what they were doing. That's literally, I'm glad you mentioned that, because on normal PCR testing for like any type of normal disease, like even like MRSA, they'd have a cutoff. Can only do so many cycles. But with COVID, they didn't come in with any cutoffs.
Right.
And people are running the snot out of it.
Right. To get a positive test.
Right. And so everybody would walk into a hospital system, anything like that, they'd all come out positive.
Right.
And the problem with the hospitals at the time is every single time they had a positive test result, they could claim it to the government and get extra money for it.
Right.
And so the hospital system saw it as a paycheck.
Right.
If we turn in so many things, then we get...
So there's like a 30% bonus or something like that for every COVID diagnosis that you had.
They get
so in other words, whatever that person was admitted for, they were admitted for a broken arm, they would do a COVID test on them, and then if the COVID test came back, then they got a 30% bonus on that payment for treating that broken arm. And then in addition to that, if you had a COVID positive test come in and you treat it with a Remdesivir, then they would actually get a 20% bonus on all of that, on their whole hospital stay. So not just on the Remdesivir, but they would get it on the whole hospital stay.
Yes, they're getting massive paychecks.
Right. So there was this incentive basically to kill people. Okay, because that's what remdesivir is. Nurses labeled it "run, death is near." Okay, and it was poison. They took it off the Ebola virus in North Africa. The Ebola study, they took it off because it had a higher mortality than the Ebola virus did in the first place. And that was actually published in the CDC. The CDC had that on their website, still has it on their website. I just found it the other day, where that study is still on the CDC website, where they talked about the treatment of two other products that they were testing along with remdesivir. I think it had a different name at the time. But they had to take remdesivir off because it was killing more people than the virus.
Well, I have personal experience with it because my brother's wife's family has she has two brothers that died from remdesivir in like short order.
Yeah.
They said from getting diagnosed with COVID, going into the hospital, and they were like a dead 2 weeks later and taking it.
Well, so you know what the trial run on all this was, right?
No, I'm not from
1980s. The 1980s with AIDS, okay, was the trial run on what they did with COVID, okay? And who was responsible for that? Anthony Fauci, okay? Anthony Fauci in 1983 or 84 got promoted to the director of the NIH or the director of the NIAID, and it's better than the director of the NIH because the head of the NIAID, which is the National Institutes of Allergy and Infectious Disease, okay, so the director of that actually controls all the money, not the NIH director, because everything got classified as like under an infectious disease category. So anything and everything that's out there that's classified under infectious disease gets money. And Anthony Fauci was then at that point able to direct where all this money was going. And so he did the same thing with AIDS that he did with COVID. The difference is that he just had more control, and he'd already had a couple of trial runs where he'd kind of worked out all the kinks and everything else, and worked out all of the propaganda, the fear propaganda, and everything else to kind of get people to want to take a vaccine. He did the same thing. So AIDS comes around, it's 100% mortality if you get it, et cetera, running, PCR tests, running all of this stuff to get people to be diagnosed with it. I mean, Magic Johnson's still with us, right? Yeah. Okay, you know why? Because he didn't get AZT. So AZT is the 1980s version of remdesivir. And a lot of this is in RFK's book that he wrote, The Real Anthony Fauci. But they did the same thing back then. PCP pneumonia was treatable with Bactrim. Okay, Bactrim, a $2 antibiotic. Okay, they wouldn't allow people to use it. Okay, you had to give them AZT. Mickey Willis, he's a movie director in Texas now. Used to be in California, and he did the movies, The Plandemic and Plandemic 2 and all that. His brother died from AZT. He was fine. He was HIV positive, quote unquote HIV positive. Okay, same thing. You have a PCR test that says you're positive with something. You have a PCR test in 2020 that says you're positive with something, and so then you get AZT. And because you didn't have any other treatments, and there were people with HIV, with AIDS, and everything else that were going around and protesting at the time. And we don't remember it that much because we didn't have as much coverage then that we do now. But there were large protests against Fauci and against the whole AIDS treatment, not allowing people to be treated. There was another medication too that was pulled out. So they did the same thing with Bactrim that they did with hydroxychloroquine. So they pulled it off, and they said everybody has to get AZT. And that was the trial run, test run. They figured out how, hey, let's just figure out the kinks and everything else. And so 40 years later, they ran with COVID, and they'd already figured out all of this other stuff and how to get, 8.2 billion people, or at least, 330 million people in the United States say, oh, okay, I'll do that. I'll raise my hand. I'll go get the COVID shot.
Well, those pharmaceutical companies are probably the most corrupt things I've ever seen, because they're making so much money on this. And if they're not going to make money at something, they figure out how to shut everything else down. And they will lobby it. They're the biggest lobbies out there.
They're bigger than the oil lobby.
bigger than the oil lobby.
Way bigger
than the oil lobby.
You know, they here, and I talked on Tucker about this. They own A to Z. They own everything. Okay, they own medical school education. All right, they fund the medical schools. Okay, they fund the education. They fund the residency programs. They fund the journals. They fund the investigators. Okay, that do the studies. They then fund the reviewers that review the studies, okay? And they in turn fund the journals that publish the studies, because the vast majority of the money that the journals get is through reprints. So when a journal publishes something, the pharmaceutical companies will buy reprints of that article so that then they can go, and their pharmaceutical reps can go around the country and hand them off to the doctors in the offices. That's the vast majority of their money comes from those reprints. Okay. And who buys them? The pharmaceutical companies buy it. So they own everything from beginning to end. And then they own the medications. They own, and you know, there's Marcia Angel from 2000. She was an ex-chief editor of the New England Journal of Medicine, came out and said that she thinks that up to half or more than potentially half of the articles in the journals and the data that's out there is actually false. And there's 6 people that, you know, have come out from all 4 major journals: the New England Journal of Medicine, Journal of American Medical Association, Lancet, and the British Medical Journal. Those are the top 4. If you get published in one of those, you know, you've got it made, right? I mean, that's, as a physician, as a scientist, that's the goal that everybody has, is to get published in one of those. And all of the chief editor, not all of them, but a chief editor from all of those journals in the last 20 years has come out and said that it's nothing but a scam. And there was an article that was published in Substack about it that I read right before I went on Tucker, and I mentioned that to him. So Richard Smith, Richard Horton, I think, and Marcia Angel are 3 of the names that were, you know.
And not only do they own all that, but they're also the biggest advertisers on your mainstream media.
Right.
Seriously.
If you look at any of your news organizations, this is brought to you by Pfizer.
70% of media money comes from pharmaceutical
companies. Yeah, and I'm all for Trump outlawing advertisements on
Well,
TV.
RFK has talked about doing it. Okay, there's only 2 countries that allow it. You know that, right?
Yeah.
Okay, United States and New Zealand. All right, there's only 2 countries in the world that allow pharmaceutical advertising. Okay, if we could eliminate pharmaceutical advertising, we would get rid of a large percentage. I mean, they'd probably figure out another way to fund the media companies. But I mean, these people that run the news that are on there,
you'll see them on the anchor desk
CNN.
and on the little
it's written on the
TV screen right underneath there. Brought to you by.
or the promo as they come on to, after they come on for commercial, is, hey, brought to you by Pfizer. You know, you've seen those. I mean, it's just, yeah. I mean, it's Good Morning America. You mentioned that earlier, right? They, Good Morning America, brought to you by Pfizer. It's a huge scam. I mean, they, like I said,
I don't see it brought to you by Chevron or
or brought to you by BP Oil or
BP
something.
Oil. Right. No, it's these pharmaceutical companies are huge, and that also has a lot to do with the whole Ukraine war too. Because surprisingly, most of the public don't know this, but if you were to look up Pfizer, Moderna, or any of those companies in Ukraine, you'll find that they have their major test facilities in Ukraine. Because Ukraine is the only.
Isn't that what Russia said? But that was that was all fake news, right?
No, I looked up myself. I printed it off. I even did a Google Earth screenshot of it once. I don't remember what I did with it, where you could literally see within blocks of each other, Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson, their test facilities over there. And the only reason why their facilities are over there is because Ukraine is the only country that allows human testing. That's how corrupt it is over there. Nobody else will allow it. You have to test on rats or something else like that. But Ukraine allows human testing for a lot of this stuff.
So how does a physician, what can they rely on as they're trying to practice medicine or healthcare? How does a good doctor practice and know who, because he just knows what the pharmacy rep tells him.
You just need to have a lot of cynicism in my opinion. You need to have a lot of discernment, and you need to have a large modicum of common sense. And I just think that you need to be able to kind of look at stuff, and the old saying, if it looks or sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Okay. And I just think that that's the way that we probably need to look at everything and look at it with a fair amount. One of my attendings, when I tried to present data from some of the articles that we would review, because every month we would review a certain number of articles and we'd present them at a faculty kind of meeting. And I just remember Steve always telling me, hey, all the stuff that comes out of China is just fake. All the data is fake. All the, you just can't trust anything that they say that's coming out of this communist country, because they're going to say whatever it is that they need to say to get things published. And now that's not just, I'm not saying I disagree with them. What I'm saying is that that's now true for probably a large majority of all of the stuff that we get, because Brooke Jackson's been trying to sue Pfizer and the company that starts with a V, the company that runs. So Pfizer. So here's how a study is done. Okay, in the United States, pharmaceutical company says we have this drug that we think is going to work. Okay, so what they do is they pay the FDA to get, basically they pay the FDA for a fee in order for them to approve the study to be run. Okay, then they pay the company to run that study for them. So what's that company going to do? Who's paying them? Right?
Sure.
So the pharmaceutical company pays that company to run the study for them. They also hire the investigators. So the pharmaceutical companies hire the company to run their study, pay the company.
It's just a third-party company, right?
It's a third-party company, okay?
I've heard sometimes that the FDA allows the pharmaceutical company to run their own study.
Well, that's how they run their own studies.
Wow.
They farm it out, okay? So the FDA doesn't run any studies.
No,
okay?
they don't have the people to do it.
They don't have the people. They don't want to do it. They should be doing it, okay? What they should be doing is they should be taking the money from these pharmaceutical companies that pay them their fee, and then they should run the study themselves. Or they should run a small pilot study that's concurrent to the study that the pharmaceutical companies are running. But right now, the pharmaceutical companies run their own studies, and what they do is they farm it out. Okay, so they farm it out to a third-party company. That third-party company then hires the investigators to run the study. Those investigators are called, like primary investigators or something along those lines. Okay. And then the pharmaceutical company pays them to run that study. So they're paying the company to run it. They're paying them to pay the investigators to run it. Okay. So there's no money that's coming from outside of the pharmaceutical company. All right. So if they have something that they don't want to see, or they have any data that they don't want to produce, or they have something, they just throw it away. Okay. And that's proven. As a matter of fact, a good friend of mine was involved in the AstraZeneca study to show you that this is what they do to data. Had a severe complication from the AstraZeneca study in November of 2020. Actually, prior to that, I think it was in August or September. But anyway, she was in the AstraZeneca study, had a severe complication, almost died. Okay. And what did AstraZeneca do? They just removed her number. She was number 3472 or whatever it is. They just removed her from the study. Okay. So that's what happens, and that's what's done. Okay. And they do it all the time.
It's a business and nothing more.
Well, right. So, but my point is that it's a conflicted business. Okay. And the system is conflicted. So the pharmaceutical company runs their own study. They pay the investigators. They then in turn pay the people that are reviewing it. From 2020 to 2022, again, for those 4 major journals that I was talking to you about, The pharmaceutical companies paid the reviewers. These are not the investigators. These are the people that review the data, okay, to then get that journal article published. So they're reviewing it on behalf of the pharmaceutical companies. Well, the pharmaceutical companies, again, pay them. They paid $1.06 billion in 3 years, from 2020 to 2022, to those 4 journal reviewers, okay? So now what are those reviewers are going to come? What kind of conclusion are they going to come to, okay? Because
nothing's going to piss off their pocketbook.
Right, okay? And then, like I said, they then in turn pay the journals that publish these to get the reprints. And the amount of money that they pay the reviewers is known. The amount of money that is paid for the reprints is unknown, because the journals don't have to disclose that information. So if they paid $1.06 billion to the people that were reviewing it, you can assume they paid at least that much to the journals to get that information into their journal and get it published.
So we have research companies here in this state. They change their names from year to year.
Yeah, because...
But,
Right.
I mean, so my involvement with them would be, I might, somebody who doesn't have money to, the ones that are researching pain medications. I've got a patient who I really can't afford the 150, whatever, to do wisdom teeth removal. And this place will pay you some. In fact, my own son got about $2,000 to have all 4 removed at once, I think. So we send them down there, and somebody gets whatever that you normally would get, Lortab, whatever the normal one, and then the other one's getting what they tell them was, we're trying to find pain medicines that are less addictive and have less symptoms of nausea and those things. So seems safe to me. I've sent lots of patients down there.
Well, I'm not saying that from an individual perspective that everything is bad.
And I
Okay.
know they hire the top oral surgeons in the area to come perform the procedures for them.
Well, yeah, I'm not questioning, the qualifications or anything else that's done that's out there. What I'm saying is the whole system, in terms of the publication of data and information that's out there, that, because you asked me,
Yeah.
what is it that people need to do to look at that's true or not true? That's what you just need to be.
But
very
are they
skeptical.
really trying to produce a drug that's as effective as what we've always done for pain and
No,
they're not.
No, their incentive, their only incentive is to produce something that somebody's going to keep coming back and getting more and more of. Think about it. Here's just a global medical thing, okay? What disease has been cured? Okay, cured. Doesn't exist anymore. We don't see it. We don't have to treat it. What disease has been cured in the United States or anywhere in the world?
Well, I have the vaxxers that say measles, mumps, rubella was like down to nothing. There were no cases. And now you anti-vaxxers, now the numbers are crawling up again.
Okay, and they base that on what?
I don't know.
So they base it on
What they saw
they
on
base it
TikTok,
on-
I'm sure.
right. They base it on a measles outbreak in Texas, where supposedly 2 people died from the measles outbreak in Texas. Okay, that measles outbreak in Texas was among vaccinated people, and they blamed it on a couple of Mennonites that had not been vaccinated. Okay, so 2 questions. One is, if the vaccines work and you're protected, why aren't you protected? Okay, and then the second thing is, those people, those 2 kids that died, as a 7-year-old and a 10-year-old, I think, both of them, in the postmortem that was done and everything else, died from a community-acquired pneumonia. So those kids had gone into a clinic to be treated and had been treated inadequately and inappropriately with the wrong treatment, the wrong antibiotics, and died from pneumonia. As a matter of fact, there was an article that Anthony published in 2007, 2008, okay, that was talking about the Spanish flu And every case that they reviewed of any of the and all of the deaths that had died 100 years ago in the Spanish flu, because some of those samples are still available, and they looked at them, every single one of those people died from an overgrowth of bacteria, not from the viral infection. So that's what's happening is that we're not treating people appropriately, and these people are dying from bacterial infections.
Isn't that the same thing happened with COVID, though? Because I know the vast majority of the people that died of COVID didn't really die of COVID. They died of extreme case of pneumonia.
Well, or they died from kidney failure from Remdesivir.
Yeah.
Okay. So
I know
people
several
don't
of
die
them.
from viral illnesses. There's even people out there that have claimed that viral illnesses.
I know a couple older people, 80s, 90s, that specifically died of pneumonia, and they call it COVID-19.
Well, yeah, because if you got a diagnosis of COVID, then the hospital got a bonus. So they're always going to put that on there on that. But
they didn't have no pneumonia going into the hospital. They had it.
Right. They had it coming out on their deathbed, right?
Yep.
In the body bag.
You know, I have a close friend, and she'll show me a picture. She was hospitalized with COVID, and her hair was gone and clumped. She looked like a cancer patient.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure if they had her on the Remdesivir or what they had her on.
If she was a COVID patient and went to the hospital, they put her on Remdesivir.
They told her that we're going to have to put you on a ventilator, and the nurse told her, get out. Check yourself out. If they put you on the ventilator, you will die.
92% of people that got on a ventilator died.
And then I don't know if it's the same nurse. She'll have to correct me because I'm sure she'll watch this episode. But the nurse told her what to do for her hair because she's like, my hair, my long lashes. She's like, get a magnesium spray, spray your head with magnesium. She has the most lush hair now. But she'll show you, no, I went from this to this, and I escaped with my life from the hospital.
Yeah, there's a few good people out there. There's actually more than you think there are.
Yeah, there were.
But that's and look, I'm not the only one that was given fake vaccines.
No, I know people that needed to travel, and they'd go, I can give you the name of a nurse who will get you a card so you can go travel.
Right. So,
you weren't the only one.
No,
you definitely weren't. Because honestly speaking, I did
caught. No, right. And I just happened to be the one that got caught. You know, it was really interesting that we found out at trial, and my attorney brought this up. On cross-examination of the Utah Health Department guy, who was about as dumb as a post. Okay, I can't remember his name. I wish I could.
Darn.
I can pull it up if you want me to find it. She questioned them that if you find out, so they found out that I was giving fake vaccines in January of 22. Okay. They indicted me in January of 23. My last COVID delivery that I took from the Utah Health Department was in September of 22. All right. So for 9 months, they knew or suspected that I was doing fake vaccines. Okay. We asked them, what are your protocols if you find out that somebody is not doing what they were supposed to do? What was your protocol? And there are two things that they were supposed to do. Was one, do a site visit and check to see what it is that people are doing and find out from them, question them, ask them, whatever. And then the second thing that they were supposed to do is they were supposed to cut me off from taking any more deliveries. If they suspected that I was doing anything wrong, they were supposed to just...
How early on did you think they suspected it?
Well, that's what I'm saying. They didn't hear anything until January 22. So that was roughly 7 or 8 months, 9 months.
Oh, just between the last one and... Yeah.
So, but for 9 months, they continued to deliver it, and then they ran a sting operation on me and had two FBI agents come in and get fake COVID cards. Okay. But their policy, okay, the Utah Health Department and the CDC, their policy was that they suspected that you were doing something wrong. They were supposed to shut you down.
So when do you think they got those fake COVID cards? Back in September, or when you issued your last one? When do you think those two FBI agents came in?
I think they came in the summer. So somebody came in, and then she referred her husband or something like that is what she was claiming.
Do you now know who it was?
I don't.
You suspect?
No, I know. Yes, I know, because I have their names, but they use fake names. So, but yes, I know who they were.